Welcome back. Well, with parts of the province expected to move into stage 3 of reopening this week after months of this COVID-19 shutdown, the question is, are we ready? Joining me now is infectious disease physician with St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton, Dr. Zain Chagla. Good morning to you, doctor.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, I think it's a question that's very much loaded. Are we ready? So I think it depends, I guess, on where you live in the province. What is your take?
Yeah, I think you have the essence of it. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen some regions of the province with fairly minimal case transmission, where there's been almost zero cases for a number of days being reported. And so I think those places are probably ready to go into phase 3 as it's the disease activity is fairly minimal. There are parts of the province still with circulating virus, particularly Peel, Toronto, the Windsor-Essex area, Halton and Chatham-Kent, where they've seen some transmission through the last week. And so, similar to what we went through with phase 2, it's probably a reasonable test to go through some of phase 3 in the areas where they're low risk and then learn our lessons and then move on to some of the more densely populated areas and outbreak areas.
And with this announcement, obviously, a lot of the public health units are being consulted. What are the sort of things that they are looking for when it comes to moving on to the next stage?
Yeah, I mean, they're looking for their disease transmission, but it's not just every case, but how many of these cases that are new transmission chains where we don't know where the origins of them are. They're looking for the physical infrastructure of some of these places that are coming back in phase 3, whether or not that they're reasonable to do, they have the ability to space and distance. And they're looking at their own data in terms of how quickly things escalated and de-escalated throughout the crisis. So are they very prepared and have testing to make sure that if things are transmitting in the community, they're able to pick it up early, or there's still not a capacity there within those communities to identify if something's going wrong?
We've seen some really good case count numbers just as a whole in the province, below that 200 mark. Do you think that we have a handle on this virus?
I think so. I mean, to say that we're ever going to get to a 0 mark or an under 50 mark is probably not reasonable. There is going to be some transmission. I think we have to, think about, again, the transmission within outbreak settings like the migrant farms is differently than the transmission within the communities, where we're seeing much less of that. So, this may be our baseline, that we get some low grade transmission within our communities. And I think, we've stayed stable while opening things up, which is a good sign, not a bad sign.
South of the border, a very different story. We saw record numbers in Florida. What's your opinion on that? And it doesn't really seem to be slowing, sadly.
No, I think, the issue with the United States is we're talking about phasing up. The United States went from phase 0 to phase 3 almost immediately in some centers. And so there was none of this learning curve in terms of seeing how things would open up correctly, as well as you started pretty high going into phase 3. Once things started transmitting again in the community, it just started exploding again in the community. It's very, very hard to stop that fire when it starts. And realistically, in the southern United States, the only thing that can be done is imposing those lockdown measures again. The population is resistant to it, but without that, I don't know of any way this is going to stop.
Yeah, and I think this is a good reminder here as we do the slow reopening that we can't let up on everything that we've learned during this shutdown. Just general hygiene and keeping that distance and doing all of that. What's one little piece of advice that you want to leave with our viewers as we do move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think for all of us that are uncomfortable, for those that feel vulnerable, that may have states that put us at higher risk of complications, just because we open up doesn't mean you have to do everything that you wanted to do. You can still adhere to the rules that we did in phase 1 and phase 2 and protect yourself. So, the options are open for people, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it.
Yeah, some really good advice there. Dr. Chagla, thank you again for joining us this morning.
No problem. Take care.
You too.